Yes, hello everybody to another edition of the Victory Lap. This is our Google Hangout that we try and have every week after In Pit Lane Goes to Air on Channel 31. We've got a couple of guests with us this week. Joining us for the Hangout from ABC's Formula One program, Box of Neutrals, is Rob James. Rob, how are you? And I suppose the question to ask you is, as far as you know, what is the latest on Jules Bianchi?
Well, I pretty much know as the rest of the world knows at the moment. So this morning we woke up to yes, the news that we know what the actual formal injury is.
Yeah, and it's not. It's not. I think Rob might have dropped out again. We're having a lot of trouble with Rob's connection, but yeah, it's not a. It's obviously a serious injury. We knew. I mean, if everybody's seen that footage that was flying around, we didn't use it on the show. I mean, I could see no point in sort of glorifying what happened there. But when you consider that accident, I mean, it's amazing he's still with us at all. But yeah, particularly horrible accident, and it'll be a long time probably before we know. But it was, I think it's fairly safe to say that that's certainly the end of his career. But let's just keep our fingers crossed that Jules manages to get out of that. But I think that it's going to introduce probably some major safety changes within Formula One over the next certainly next year, because they can't. It's not. Everyone says, "Oh, it's an isolated incident," but then you go back and have a look at Brundle doing pretty much the same thing all those years ago. You're probably of the opinion that it's not that isolated at all. These things can happen. Also joining us this week, if you've been watching the show on Channel 31, we've been talking about Formula 4 and all things there. And our guest last week on the show was Andrew Sill, and Andrew's joined us again this week. Andrew, welcome, and you've just been watching the show and been hearing the words of the CEO of CAMS, Eugene Arocca. First of all, we'll give you the opportunity to comment on it. What did you think about what he had to say?
Well, I think the whole strategy was a bit scattered still, and didn't answer many of our questions. And being a Formula Ford guy, and had another dig at us, and I think some of the claims he's made again are totally incorrect. That some competitors are spending up to $30,000 on their engines. Well, you mentioned Adrian Lazaro won the Victorian State Championship. His car has done 18,000 kilometres and he hasn't spent a cent on it. So there's a guy that won a championship whose engine is 18,000 kilometres old. If that engine was the same engine I think that was in John Martin's car back in 2006, and he hasn't developed it one bit. He was working with his father and a few friends to run him. He didn't spend $30,000. If he spent more than $15,000 this year racing, he'd be doing really well. So again, the numbers spooked are incorrect. The strategy seems a bit all over the place. 1 minute they're talking about Formula One, then they're talking about V8 supercars, and your questioning about Formula 3 was interesting. That he really didn't have much to say there, and we still can't see what the pathway is. What does it mean? It was all a bit vague. So I think from a business perspective and a strategic perspective, CAMS have really done a terrible sales job on this. It seems like they can't get a break at all, and I suppose maybe they deserve it. But oh well, as you said, time will tell. We'll see what happens.
I think the thing that surprised me, as you said, was that where it goes from after. I mean, what Eugene was saying in terms of what the next step is. It was obviously the Australian Sports Commission has put a lot of pressure on CAMS. I mean, if you read their report on their pathway to excellence, I think it was called, which looked at all sports, it singled out both CAMS and also Motorcycling Australia to say that here were two sports that did not have what they considered a formal, well-structured pathway to the elite level of their sport, which surprised me a bit in the case of motorcycling, because when you have a look at the number of Australians who have gone through that, I mean, they've done really well, but so obviously this has been partly in response to the Sports Commission, but Yeah, I mean, it was. Yeah, it was funny. There's still a whole lot. As I say, there's a whole lot of questions in terms of what worried me was when he said that Cams would talk with the winner, and then they would decide together in terms of how this money would be spent and how much money would be spent. Yeah, I suppose
It's very vague. I think that we know that the government is they're trying to get some government money, and they think this is the pathway that they need. But all the underlying issues to get people to Formula One aren't being addressed, and the biggest issue is money. That you can't get to Formula One racing in Australia, and at some point in time you've got to get out of the country, and that's what a lot of the motorcycle guys have done. Casey Stoner didn't hang around and race in Australia, and that is just the sheer reality of the situation. That if you want to have an international career and reach Formula One, you're not going to do it racing in Australia, racing Formula 3, then into whatever. You've got to make the jump to Europe, and everybody that has left, that's made to Formula One in recent times, and there's one every 10 years might have a crack at it, if the right circumstances are in place, that you need to get to Europe. Mark Webber, he raced Formula Ford, and he went overseas and raced Formula Ford, and then went through the ranks in Europe. Daniel Ricciardo did a little bit of Formula Ford racing, but he really didn't do anything, and I find it intriguing that Cams are claiming that they really supported Daniel Ricciardo. We can't see anywhere where they supported Daniel Ricciardo. He left the country at a very young age, and if you have a look at all the categories that Daniel Ricciardo raced in, it's numerous. So that concept of development and the pathway and the gaps and all this kind of stuff, it's just rubbish. It's simply just rubbish. Everybody in motorsport knows that you've got to get to Europe as soon as you can, but you've got to have the money behind you because the sponsors aren't there in Australia. We're too small a country. You've got to get out of here, and you've got to go if you want to get to that level. And that's why the Formula Ford group have always said that most of the people racing in Australia want to race V8 supercars. It's more realistic for them. So when you look at racing V8 supercars, what's better? And I've spoken to people about this, the drivers that have raced V8 supercars, Formula 3 and Formula Ford, and they've all said that Formula Ford is better for V8 supercar drivers than Formula 3 because you don't have the grip and so on, so it's better training.
Yeah, I think that was the other thing too. He was very, very keen to point out that they've got this fabulous relationship now, apparently, with V8 supercars, and the fact that V8 supercars were really keen to have them, on the card. And you can see why that's happened because there's V8 supercars have sort of struggled a few times this year to pull together a decent sort of support category. We saw up at Winton, I think it was, there was sort of this last-minute call out to the HQ guys, to say, come on up, and have a race. It was all put together very quickly, and I think a similar thing happened in Queensland as well.
Nobody wants to run on the V8 supercars, and the Formula Ford experience was that when you have to front up $100,000 for a TV package, right? Who pays for it? If you've got to buy marquees and corporate boxes and all that kind of stuff for your category, who pays for it? And it comes back to the competitor. And so the competitors are paying for everything. And not only that, is when you go and race in a V8 supercar build, what do you reckon the airlines and all the accommodation outlets do? They hike up their prices. If you go to Clipsal 500, the prices go through the roof. So your accommodation and travel expenses go through the roof as well. So for Cams to say that, this Formula 4 is going to be more affordable, it may well be. Show us the numbers, and maybe that's the problem in their strategy, is that it's all been airy-fairy and there's no visibility as to what they, why is this going to be better, why is it going to be cheaper, what's their financial modelling, so people can buy into it. So they're now claiming that they're going to have a full grid of cars, but how many free drives are they going to give away? And the other interesting thing I found was he really had to go a lot of the teams that are associated in Formula Ford. And yes, some of the Formula Ford guys did do some modelling. These are experienced national level running teams that have been doing it for 20 plus years, right? That were never consulted in any of this process. Yes, they did do their own modelling and worked out roughly what it's going to cost. And we worked out that it is going to be over $200,000 exercise for a family to go racing. And but the interesting thing is, Cams want to talk to the Formula Ford teams who run Formula 4 cars. So if he thinks that we're all a bunch of whackers and we're going to overinflate costs, why would he be talking to Formula Ford teams? Because there aren't that many teams out there that can actually support Formula 4. So you might want to start liking some of these guys because he might need them. And some of these guys might even help out if he's nice to them. So it's sort of like, you know, there's this story that's being told, but then there's this reality that's fighting the other way, and you know, it's all very, very confusing. And again, as we've always claimed, got nothing wrong with the category. Bring it in if you like, but since you're cams, do it the right way, and you know, don't muck us all around, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we've got online. Frosty has come in and just said, Frosty the Snowman has said that basically it should be a drive to Europe prize again, and you know, have a paid drive in Europe with someone like, you know, with Mark Webber's, you know, GP3 team or something, or perhaps even through Indy Lights. Now the interesting thing is, one of the problems overseas, and Rob James from Box of Neutrals is back with us again. Rob, the problem is now there's just so many diverse ways of getting into, you know, supposedly getting into Formula One, and ultimately it comes down to, doesn't really matter how good you are in all of these different categories, whether it's Formula Renault 3.5, GP2, GP3, all the rest of them. It really all comes down to how much money you can take to a team.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the conditions over in Europe are so different to, say, in America as well, and not to mention back over in Asia as well. So we're seeing, you know, of course, locally, at least in Australasia and, of course, in New Zealand and even in Malaysia, we've got some young guys over there racing, some young Aussies, I should say, as well, racing in those Asian categories. And there is a lot of variety. It's going to get to the stage where we're going to get a Formula One driver at the age of 13 who's done, you know, go-karts, you know, power boating and all sorts of obscure formulas just to get to Formula One. And, you know, I think, I'm not sure what it is. I think it's partly to do with Europe just having a lot of, you know, it's a big business, motorsport. It's a massive business over there. And I don't think in Australia we appreciate how big it is over there. And that's just because, you know, motorsport's inherently ingrained in European culture, and that's just the way it is. But, you know, you've got the likes of, you know, Formula Renault that was pretty much set up as one great big marketing activation for the Renault company. It sort of evolved as this sort of weird mongrel junior formula. It's ended up working quite well for itself. And, you know, of course, when you've got the likes of Formula Renault, and then you've got the Eccleston-owned GP3, GP2 categories, and then you've got the FIA F insert number here formula. There's a lot of options, but there isn't a clear or defined pathway. Not to mention as well, we're seeing even more obscure categories like Auto GP, which is pretty much the remnants of the old A1 GP series. There was that weird football attempt over in Europe with the Super League formula.
Yes.
That's what we need. The St Kilda Football Club team, that's what I want to see.
Yeah, I think if that was the case, if they'd have a reverse grid race, they'd have to start sort of the day before. But I think they actually sort of, well, we've got a little bit of that even happening sort of to an extent at Bathurst on the weekend in VA supercars, because, you know, I noticed on the HRT cars that one of their sponsors is the Collingwood Football Club, which I think is fairly bizarre. I don't know what the hell Collingwood sort of, you know, think they're going to be getting out of it and who's done the deal there, but that seems really strange to me.
It's interesting actually what you say about the overseas stuff. That I think that Formula 4 and the concept of Formula 4 really has a place in Europe, because there are so many different open wheeler categories and spruiked pathways, and maybe Formula 4 will rationalise that a bit. In Australia, we don't have that problem. We don't have the population. We don't have the size to support all these categories. What we did when I was involved with the Formula Ford Association was look at the concept of pathways and try to sort of work out what does that mean. And one thing we looked at was the US market, and that's why we created the alliance with the Road to Indy series, because it actually covers a lot of those questions, which is the financial question of how you're going to keep on funding this. And Matthew Brabham's proven that the Formula Ford winner will get that chance to have a track at racing in the US. They'll get the financial incentive to compete in the series. And if you win, say the USF 2000 first run, you get basically a subsidised drive, almost fully funded for the next year, and it keeps on going all the way to IndyCars. So that is a pathway to another pathway to consider, and the program is really, really good. As far as giving you that financial leg up to get to that next level. And I don't know whether the Cams have got a plan for Formula 4 to keep on pushing it through the ranks.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing too. I mean, everybody's obviously so obsessed with Formula One, and that's what Eugene was saying tonight. And it is the pinnacle of the sport. But you see, even overseas now, we've got increasing numbers of young drivers who are that close to getting into Formula One, who are now starting to say, "Look, I'll be an understudy. I'll be a reserve driver for a year, perhaps 2 years. But if I don't get the drive sooner rather than later, I've got other options now. I've got the World Endurance Championship, I've got all the GT races going on, I've got DTM, or they can go to the US, and they've got the big United Sports Car Championship over there, and of course IndyCar. And as you say, that whole pathway that they've got in IndyCar now, as you say, if you're lucky enough and good enough to win all of those steps, you're almost guaranteed at getting into IndyCars. And I don't know whether both CAMS and the Australian Sports Commission are still so totally Euro focused and so focused on Formula One that they don't realise that it's not the only game in town. It might be the biggest game in town, but somebody like Will Power winning an IndyCar championship is an international Australian success story.
Oh no, apparently it's not. Apparently it's not. Apparently the government knows where things are going with motorsport, and they've said that Formula One is the pinnacle, and that is what CAMS are pandering to. The government has said that you need to create pathways to Formula One because they probably don't know what else is out there and don't know what the landscape is. So CAMS are creating their own little system to pander to the government to get money to invest in we don't know what, and I don't know how that money is going to benefit the rally guys and the sports sedan guys and the Formula Vs and the improved production guys and the HQ guys that are keeping motorsport alive in this country. You were at the racetrack on the weekend down here in Victoria, and there were more competitors at that event than any V8 supercar event going around, and that is the mainstay of motorsport in this country. It's not top-level motorsport, and it's not young kids, because the average age of the competitors is probably 35. So what is CAMS going to do for me? I'm 41 today, Brett. It's my birthday today, Brett.
Oh, happy birthday! Look, I'd sing happy birthday, but we'd lose the 5 viewers we've got already. So we won't.
Look, I know we're breaking records here. We're breaking records. 5 viewers next week will be 10. We're gonna get a big increase.
Yeah, we don't want to be too successful though, because it'll just encourage Malcolm Turnbull even more. So he might use
your mate Malcolm. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh well.
Now, before we head off, we've spoken about Formula 4 and Formula Ford, but we've got the biggest race, supposedly the biggest race in the country, apart from I suppose the Grand Prix, the Bathurst 1000. I'll ask you both. Bathurst used to be the really big highlight for me of the year, and now to me it's just lost a lot of that appeal. It's it's instead of having all those different categories, all those different that rich sort of narrative that went through all the different classes and all the different sorts of cars, it's not as appealing anymore. To me, it's just another round of the V8 supercars on a really, really good circuit. Rob, what do you think as a Formula One guy? I mean, are you going to be absolutely glued to Bathurst on the weekend?
Well, that's the thing. I actually quite enjoy the spectacle of it. And, looking at the races that have gone in years gone by, the racing has been quite interesting. Sure, over, 6 hours or however long it goes for, you are going to have those quite mundane sort of periods during the race. It really comes alive in that last hour, even 2 hours. It's basically...
like a basketball match.
Yeah, pretty much. So you just got to sit through it for a bit, endure it, and the payoff will be amazing. And I certainly hope that will be the case this weekend. I think, which is most bizarre because the championship is quite competitive. You've got the Triple 8 guys, you've got Full Performance Racing, you've got Volvo Polestar Racing. up there too. And let's not forget, there's a lot of other teams on the grid with an outside chance. You've got Brad Jones Racing, who actually probably arguably are in that front line favourites to take out the win, but you've also got Nissan Motorsport, you've got Erebus that might take an outside win. So there's a lot of, Bathurst, a lot can happen over 161 laps. So basically, if it's kind of like the short attention span syndrome. If you're not if you're a casual fan of motorsport, just tune into that last hour of Bathurst. The rest of us will sit through lap 1 to 161, regardless of how dreary it might be. We'll find some ways to amuse ourselves.
Yeah, I just think that's the interesting thing, though. I mean, when you've only got those, it really sort of, the opening is going to be spectacular. There will be close racing pretty much right throughout the day, but it was always those little subplots. It was always, you had so many different categories, and you weren't bored because there was a slowly developing narrative over the day of what different classes were doing and who was moving up, and you would look back and say, well, hang on, that class. That Class C car is now in the top 10, and how far further up can they go? I think that this year one of the things that's made V8 supercars more appealing is obviously the fact that it's not just the two-horse race anymore with Falcon and Holden, but really when you look at it, Volvo is probably the new world order, I suppose. Volvo is probably the favourite. They've got new engines that have come straight from the factory, which they say are going to be a lot more powerful, and also give them a slightly better fuel economy, which will probably help them. But Nissan, I think, have been a little bit disappointing, and Erebus. I mean, I'd love to. I think everybody would love to see Erebus win, if only to see what the reaction was from Mercedes-Benz Australia, because they did promise when we went to the launch of Erebus, and Rob Smiley, because he was there, I did ask that question. I said, surely you'll jump on board when they win Bathurst, and they said at the time, no, it has nothing to do with us. But gee, I'd be really surprised if they crossed the line first next Sunday, if we didn't see something in one of the papers on Monday saying congratulations from Mercedes-Benz Australia. Andrew, what's your interest in Bathurst, and what do you think will happen on the weekend?
Well, I've been following Bathurst ever since I've been a little kid, and I remember the days with the Group A's and whatever, and I used to be able to sit and watch the whole thing all day. Nowadays, I'm a bit like you, I reckon. I'm there for the start of the race. I have a nap in the middle of the race, and that's compulsory. You must have a nap in the middle of the race. And that last hour, the past couple of years has been unbelievable to watch. I think now with the way that the supercars are panning out, it really can be anyone's race. It's all about reliability. So they're driving these cars to their limits now for 161 laps. They are not resting. I remember seeing Brocky on the race cam, having a chat with the commentators and dropping lap times by 3 or 4 seconds because he got a bit carried away with the talking. Well, that's gone out the window now. Everyone has to be on the pace, and they've got masseurs and they're having showers in between their stints and whatever. So, Erebus could get up there, Nissan could get up there. You never know. So, it's that last hour. I think he's probably the best viewing that I've seen the past few years in that last hour. But I do have a soft spot for the different categories. Who's going to punt off the Toyota Corolla coming down Conrod?
Exactly.
But I don't know. Maybe those days are gone, and we never know what might happen. It'll be a bit funny though. It just proves that you don't need glitz and glamour to put on a good show. Sometimes in motorsport, you can mix it up a bit and still have a bit of a spectacle. But really, I couldn't tell you who's going to be a front runner, because Volvo might be okay, but it could be a bit of bad luck. They could hit a kangaroo. You never know, or a rock. So wouldn't we love DJR to come up and have a bit of a outing? So it's anyone's race, which is good for the sport. It's just a pity that I don't know, it just seems to be a bit of a lull in the V8 supercar thing. But they can still put on a good show on the right day.
I think that's the interesting thing. I mean, that you mentioned all of the different categories, and of course the the race that I can sit through, I sat through, for 2 years in a row. I've been up there sitting through, more than happily sitting through the whole 12 hours of it, is, of course, the Bathurst 12-hour. It was just fascinating from the opening lap through until the last lap because of that texture that was in there. Frosty's asked a question to Andrew saying, what would be the better event for you guys to attend? Which would you rather be at, the Bathurst 1000 or the 12-hour? I mean, I think what he's talking about is you guys as in Formula Ford.
Well, interestingly enough, Formula Ford is at the Bathurst 12-hour event next year. And we've been there in the past. The Formula Ford Association was invited by the organisers to be a support event, and we put on the Formula Ford 1600 category, which is the old Escort Kent engine-powered cars. And so we're going to have over a 35-car grid at Bathurst next year at the 12-hour event. And from an event perspective, at the Bathurst 1000, the V8 Supercar event, as a support category, you don't get many laps. There's not a lot of opportunities because in between development series, V8 Supercars, practice, qualifying, etc., you can't get many laps in there for other categories unless you're starting and racing at 6:30 in the morning. So for Formula Ford, it's actually really good to be on the 12-hour because we get some really good track time. We don't have to be there at 5 o'clock in the morning and get our cars ready to be on the track by 6:30 kind of thing. So, yeah, the Formula Ford's had a great time. I went up and had a crack at it a few years ago, and it was an unbelievable event for Formula Ford, an unbelievable event. And you could just see then how it was going to continue to grow, that 12-hour event. So, for me, I'd take the 12-hour event as a Formula Ford competitor because I just think you get better value for money.
It's interesting. We also saw with you talk about the Dunlop series. They're probably, because they're going to race. It looks increasingly likely they're going to race at that at the series launch and the test day on the same weekend as the Bathurst 12-hour. That today the Clipsal 500 announced that the Ferrari Asian Challenge is going to be a support race. Rob, does that surprise you? And I mean, what do you think of importing a category like that rather than sort of having? I imagine there'd be plenty of local categories like sport, sedans, and those things who would be more than happy to fill that spot.
It's even the same sort of argument with the Formula One Grand Prix. I mean, we saw, not too long ago we had Aussie racing cars, V8 Utes, the whole cavalcade, and Formula Ford, of course, and Formula 3. We had Bruno Senna racing a Formula 3 car, and that was quite a remarkable spectacle to see. And yet, this year was probably quite low with regards to sport races at the Formula One. And I guess I sort of admire what people have done, going somewhere a little bit different. I mean, as sort of a lover of obscure motorsports, I don't mind something that's a little bit out of the box when it comes to a support category. I mean, you go to a vet supercar round, or you even go to a Shannon's Nationals round or a state round. You see the sort of same sort of machinery, and that's all well and good. But it's not every day that you get a sea of international Ferrari drivers. Yes, they may be a lot of rich businessmen. But it's certainly something different to see. I mean, the success of the Ferrari, that club day that they hosted at Sydney Motorsport Park earlier in the year, it was a great spectacle. I mean, we saw Formula One cars from years gone by take part. A lot of history involved with it. And I'm not the biggest sort of Ferrari kind of guy. I don't really fall for the passion or the emotion of Ferrari, so I can definitely declare I have no interest in Ferrari whatsoever. But yeah, I'd like to see some more obscure. I mean, I'd love to see. I think I've spoken with you before, Brett, about in New Year's Eve in 1999, the American Le Mans series going around the streets of Adelaide. If we had like an annual, even if it was one race from, say, the World Endurance Championship, I think that would be a great thing to see. Even if it gets tacked on to a V8 supercar race or if it's a standalone thing, I think seeing some real sports car racing in Australia would be great.
Yeah, that race was 2000 into 2000 and into 2001. The American Le Mans series was there. It still remains in. A couple of times the Bathurst 12 hours has come close, but it still remains in my mind the best run and the most fun race meeting I've ever been to in Australia. The professionalism of the people behind the American Le Mans series was it was a revelation, and that was the whole thing that eventually got that got us to Le Mans was we just went, well, how good is this? Imagine what, and everyone was so enthusiastic. All the teams were so rapt at being there. Even the categories that ran as support, like the sports sedans and all those guys, when they got home, they were all sent letters from Don Paynos saying thank you for helping, thank you for coming and making us such a success. And the whole thing looked ready to take off, and it was V8 supercars that basically killed that off, because at the time, Tony Cochran said that this town ain't big enough for the both of us. You make the decision. You either have the Clipsal 500 and V8 supercars, or you have the American Le Mans series. You can't have both, and unfortunately, I think, although probably it was a very sensible move financially in the end, because Clipsal's become such a success, but. From my point of view, I'd have been happy to have seen the ALMS and there every year, but
I've got an idea, Brett.
Yep.
I've got an idea for the Clipsal 500. Just hear me out. I think it's a good one. We all love a celebrity car race. I can see.
You're probably right there, but anyway.
Yeah, no. Cams have got 20 cars now, so how about we get 20 B-grade celebrities, whack them in a Formula 4. Around Clipsal, put on a show for the crowd. I reckon we get Eugene Arocca versus Andrew Still in one of the cars at Clipsal. We get Daryl Summers, some of those other big names that have been around, and we put them on a Clipsal. I reckon it's a winner.
I've seen Daryl Summers of late, and Daryl Summers has got about as much chance of getting in and out of a Formula 4 car as I have, which is basically Buckley's and none. I've noticed Mike Jacobson has popped up on the screen. Are you there, Mike? And can we hear you this week?
Oh, we can't hear him again.
No, we can't. We can't hear it. We can't hear him again. We're gonna have to sort that out. I believe it was Mike's. Was it your birthday today or yesterday, Mike? I did see somewhere that it was your birthday. So happy birthday. So we all say happy birthday, and it's Andrew's birthday today. So everybody's having it. Rob, are you having a birthday?
I don't have a birthday till next year.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a coincidence. Actually, I'm having a birthday next year. I have them every year. I obviously enjoyed the first one because I've had 53 of them now, and I hopefully won't be stopping for quite some time.
Well, I've had 24 of them, but I've only claimed about 19 of them.
I have shoes that are older than you. Actually, it was funny. I was looking back on Channel 31's 20 years of broadcasting, and right at the only thing that I popped up on at all was an appearance on Chart-Busting 80s with Josie Pirelli right at the end of the program, which was memorable for two reasons. One, what you didn't see after we threw to the band was Josie leaping up onto my shoulders, which was interesting, and basically rupturing another disc in my back, and also the fact that I really do think when I looked at the footage earlier this afternoon, I think I was wearing exactly the same shirt as I wore on Tuesday night on like tonight's show. So that shows you how not a lot has changed over the years. Okay, we might just go to wrap this up. We should point out just quickly that the World Endurance Championship is also on this Sunday as well at Mount Fuji. Audi, obviously Toyota are going to be wanting to get back at Audi. Audi sort of won the last round at Circuit of the Americas. So Toyota will be throwing everything at that. So if you've got the resources and you've paid your money to the ACO and IMG and all the people, you can watch that online. Unfortunately, it is pay-per-view now, but it's not a lot. It's about $6 or $7, I think, to be able to watch it. But it should be free. But anyway, that's another discussion for another time. Just quickly as we go around the table, as it were, for Bathurst on the weekend, I can't see anybody beating the 888 guys. They've got the best cars, probably the 4 best drivers. I think Volvo would be the thing is, I think Volvo would be a much better chance if they had Scott McLaughlin and Greg Ritter sharing a car rather than sort of having the internationals. I mean, with no due respect to Robert Dahlgren and Alex Premer. I think that to have the two local guys in there. Greg Ritter's a really, really underrated driver. He's he's not underrated by Gary Rogers. I know I've spoken to Gary in the past, and he's got enormous respect for Greg. But and like a lot of them, he deserves a full-time drive. But I think they would be I think they'd be a really, really good chance of winning. But yeah, I'll go with Jamie Whincup and Paul Dumbrell. Rob, what's your tip for the weekend?
I'd have to echo your sentiments as a childhood Ford fan. I don't think the 14-year-old of me will be loving this weekend too much. It will be a 888 whitewash. They are just too good at what they do, and full credit to them. They're the best operation in the pit lane, and they've consistently been so for almost a decade now. I think if you look back at V8 Supercars, 10 years ago, you never would have expected V8 Supercars to be in the state that it's in, with the amount of manufacturers that are now involved too. Well, indeed, some manufacturers who have withdrawn some of their support. I think I agree with you in the stance of Volvo being the outside chance to take the win, and I think that would be a remarkable victory to see. I don't think we'll see a repeat of that infamous Scaife Richards podium of the Nissan era. I think it will be quite well received. I think Scotty McLaughlin's Jandal comment won a lot of Volvo fans over. I think, if Volvo took out the win this weekend, I think it'd be quite well received, and that's my outside chance to take the win this weekend.
Andrew, your tip?
Yeah, I reckon. Look, I've got a soft spot for the GRM team. One of my former mechanics is a mechanic for them, and so I reckon Scott McLaughlin could be the one. I actually think Premer might be okay. He's been fast in the car, so I think that it could be a good combination. I think that the newer car sort of suits Premer a bit, and so they could be on the money. So I'd love to see them on the top step. Garth Tander hasn't been there for a little while, but I think that another good Formula 4 to Garth Tander and his wife Leanne. So we're going to put our support behind them. But look, as I said earlier, it could be anybody's race. We don't know. It will come down to reliability and who will be there in the last hour. So it's going to be another great one to watch. And hopefully, I don't know, I haven't seen the weather forecast. Hopefully we can get that rain shower in the last half an hour to spice things up for us. So never know.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely overdue a wet Bathurst. I think. Hey guys, thanks for joining us. Thanks to the people who are watching online, and those people who are watching. If you're watching on the YouTube channel on the repeat, we go to air after our episode of In Pit Lane, which goes to air in Melbourne at 10 o'clock. So we sort of pop up around sort of 10:30 after the show and just have a chat. If you would like to join us, if you'd like to just sort of pop up and be a guest on the Hangout, just send us a line. Join our Google Plus page, and just let us know that you would like to appear and have a chat. It's just basically, as you've seen tonight, a group of people sitting around and basically having a chat about motorsport. Next week, apart from Bathurst on the show, we've got the MotoGP preview. We'll give you all the details from Bathurst, of course, from the World Endurance Championship, and of course, and Russia and Sochi. Rob, what's the deal with box of neutrals this week?
You'll have to ask Jetstar that question. My colleague Ginley. Their flight has been delayed by about 7 hours. They're due to come back tomorrow morning. They were due to come back about 1 o'clock time, but I think they're coming back around 7. And Pete has to work the afternoon shift at his job. And we've got to pre-record the show on Thursday night. It'll be quite a tired show for a couple of the guys. They'll be a bit jet lagged, but yes, 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time on ABC Grandstand Digital. We'll have our Well, I guess in rather unfortunate circumstances, I guess a bit of a debrief instead of a race review of the events over at the Japanese Grand Prix. That'll be a half-hour sort of affair. But we do have our 1-hour live race preview, ad-free, no sort of obscure memberships to insurance companies with us. Yeah, our Russian Grand Prix race preview. That'll be 9 p.m. I think from memory. I'll have to check local guides for that one. But yeah, 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, Sunday night on ABC Grandstand Digital Radio for our Russian Grand Prix preview.
And of course, if you don't have a digital radio, you can of course get that online as well at the ABC Grandstand website. Okay, guys. Now I see Mike has popped up again. Let's just see if we can hear from Mike. Mike, are you there? Are you there? It is not raining in Tokyo. Can you? It is not raining in Tokyo.
Well, hopefully I'll be there.
Oh, he speaks. Johnson.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Spoken with Mo now.
We don't need those yellow SBS subtitles underneath Mike's video.
Well, Mike, seeing you've managed to get the technology working, we have to ask you now for your tip for Bathurst.
God, what a question. Well, I would like to see a Ford win it, but who knows? I think really probably Triple Eight are in a pretty strong position. And, yeah, who knows? I mean, it's always a mixed bag, isn't it? Anything can happen up there.
Yes, as well, especially for... I haven't seen... Has anybody seen the forecast? I haven't seen any forecast at all from up there. I know that it seems to be fine at the moment. No, there's... No, Yep, we will have to have a look there. We've seen. It looks like Andrew has morphed into a sleeping dog. There we are. So a bit.
I have. That's what happens at night. You know, I transform into a dog.
I've been to nightclubs like that. Gone home with. No, I won't. Anyway, we won't go into that. What is the dog's name?
This is Lulu.
Hello, Lulu. Let's see if we can drive Lulu. Lulu!
Oh, okay. I've got the headphones in.
Oh, well, there you go. Well,
here we go. Can you hear?
Lulu! No.
There you go.
Lulu! Okay. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll be able to get the chance to do this again fairly soon. But for now, Rob, Mike, and Andrew, thanks for joining us. Thanks to you for joining us wherever you are, and we'll hopefully see you next week at about 10:30 for another edition of In Pit Lane, the Victory Lap. But from all of us here, I am now about to click the button which puts us off the air, but it doesn't do it straight away. So let's see how long it takes before we actually disappear. And we're starting now.